Okay, so just a little bit about Speak Out. It's a UK-based organization that's aimed to cancel silence around harassment and bullying in the workplace. This event is the first of our new series, Speak Out Allied, where we come together with professionals, activists, organizations, etc., to create events where we utilize the data from our anonymous survey. These events are meant to raise awareness and give you tools to ultimately put an end to workplace bullying and harassment. For today's event, we have partnered with Michelle, who's a life and mindset coach. Hi, Michelle. And she also specializes in working with highly sensitive people. We're also partnered with Jessica Doyle, who's a voice coach and who will be guiding us through an amazing workshop today focused on gaining confidence to speak up in abusive and or intimidating situations. So I'm also a yoga instructor, and I always find it really helpful to take a moment before we begin to set an intention for the event with a brief meditation. So if you'd like to join, if you feel comfortable, please find a comfortable seat and bring the soles of your feet to a solid surface, if possible. Elongate the spine, again, if possible. And if you feel safe, gently blink your eyes closed. Otherwise, gaze lightly towards the floor or your lap. Hands can be resting on the lap, or you can place left hand on your heart, right hand on your belly. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Fill up your lungs, your chest rises, belly expands. Exhale through the mouth. 2 more like that. Inhale through the nose. Exhale, let it out. Last time, inhale. And let it go. Now bring your awareness to the surface you're resting on, whether it's a chair, a couch, bed, or a floor. Feeling the connection of this supporting surface to your body, and knowing that that surface is in some way connected to the earth. Recognize that wherever you are, you always have this supported space of breath and connection to the earth to go back to, and that this is a safe space. Take another deep breath in through the nose. Let it out. Now for today's event, I'd like to offer an intention of simply keeping open hearts and minds throughout this session, and knowing that whatever wisdom or knowledge we gain today is meant to be. Whatever is transmitted and absorbed is meant to be, and we can relax in knowing that. And lastly, we are here to learn, share, and support each other, and we can relax in knowing that we are creating a safe and non-judgmental space for each other. Let's take one more breath in. Exhale it out. Now let's bring our awareness back to the sensations of your body, then to the sounds and sensations in the room around you. Again, feeling the solidity of the surface under you. Gently blink your eyes open, bring yourself back into the physical space and back to our virtual meeting space. Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and move into the information now that we have clear, grounded minds. So before I present the data, I'd like to do a quick poll. So I'm going to drop the link right into your the chat box. 1 second, let me get a hold of that link. Okay. So that is in the chat box now. So if you'd like to go ahead and click on that and read through the questions. You can also use the QR code that's about to show up on the screen using your phone. So here are the questions. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and show the results. So all across the board, really all of these responses are gaslighting. I wanted to just show you some examples and get you to understand that gaslighting can look like any normal situation, and it can show up in a lot of different ways. So with that, I'd like to go into the survey, our Speak Out survey. Let's see, here we go. So the survey, Speak Out survey is an anonymous questionnaire. We use it to collect data around workplace bullying. Anyone can fill it out. So you'll be getting that link in your email after the event. So you can take a couple minutes to do that if you want to share your experience. So for the dashboard, this is what the data gives us. So we have an example here of what our dashboard looks like. You can go to our website and change the data, filter out variables based on what you're interested in. So into the data of gaslighting specifically, as you can see, about 70% of reports cite gaslighting as their main source of workplace abuse. In 90% of these cases, other people are aware of it. 4 out of the 5 people report that this harassment came from a senior manager or a supervisor. Most people are not reporting this because of fears of retaliation or that they won't be believed. In my opinion, most importantly, 90% of people say that this impacts their mental health. So needless to say, this is a really important topic for us to learn about and bring light to in the workplace. So I don't want to take any more time. So with that, Michelle, I will hand it over to you once I stop presenting.
Thank you, Addison. And thank you for that meditation. That was super helpful. Right, so I will share my screen and then I'll get started. So hi everyone, just to start things off by introducing myself. My name is Michelle, I'm from London, and I'm a certified life and mindset coach. I've always had a curiosity surrounding human behavior. I was always very much exposed to people since a very young age. I was very much exposed to people with various mental health struggles, which made me question a lot of things. And that's what desperately made me want to find answers, to find solutions and explanations. So now I'm on the other side of it all, and I'm sharing my learnings with others, with all of you, and I'm coaching individuals who are also ready to create positive change in their lives as well. So like Addison said earlier, I am a highly sensitive person, and I work with highly sensitive people as well. So that basically means that we're extremely sensitive to our environment. Now, 15 to 20% of the population are highly sensitive. And highly sensitive people are simply at the far end of the sensitivity spectrum. So everyone, unless they are narcissists, have a certain degree of empathy and sensitivity. But highly sensitive people are just at the far end of that spectrum. So these are some of those traits that you might have if you are a highly sensitive person. You will have a deep sense of empathy. You will be aware of subtleties in your environment. You will have a very highly tuned nervous system, which makes you startle easily, and it makes you very affected by noises, sounds, lights in your environment, or people around you. You might get easily overwhelmed. You will be very intuitive, and you will have a depth of processing ability, which means that you analyze things in a lot of detail, which unfortunately means that making decisions can be a little bit difficult at times. So if you feel like you associate with any of these points, I definitely recommend looking into high sensitivity, and there are books that I can recommend to you as well. There's a book called The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron, and Elaine Aron is the doctor who carried out all of this research on high sensitivity. So as both a child and an adult, up until a few years ago, my sensitivity has also meant that when I would see others suffering, I just wanted to fix it for them. So from a very young age, I became very neglectful of my own needs, and I had very poor boundaries. And others saw me as someone who they could come to, and I just took on their pain for them. So from my home environments to working environments and even relationships, my life started to get caught in this spiral, this familiar pattern of toxicity, bullying, and manipulation. Once it starts in one place, it does tend to transfer into other areas of your life. So I became very used to being around people who had these kind of qualities, toxic qualities, and in fact, many of which had a very narcissistic trait. So I became very used to being around people with narcissistic traits from a very young age. It's also extremely common for highly sensitive people to be drawn towards people who are narcissistic. Because essentially both come from opposite ends of the sensitivity spectrum. So the two become like magnets, because you've got the highly sensitive person who absolutely loves to give and sometimes, unfortunately, can be overgiving. And then you've got the narcissist who loves to take from others. So when I talk about the narcissistic trait, what do I mean by that? These are some of the qualities: lack of empathy, a sense of entitlement, grandiosity, an excessive need for admiration. They'll be very controlling and very manipulative. They'll take advantage of others to get what they want. Of course, with little empathy, with little or no empathy. They'll have difficulty regulating their own emotions and behavior. So they'll react with rage and belittle others to make themselves appear more superior to others. So narcissists so subtly make you believe that you're the one who's crazy and that you're the one with the problem. Once these toxic patterns take place in one aspect of your life, so once you encounter people who have this kind of manipulative effect on you in one aspect of your life, it will more often than not transfer into other areas of your life. So if it's happening at home, for example, then you will likely enter relationships and workplaces with similar toxic behavior. People who have been belittled by a narcissist usually struggle with self-worth, and consequently, they end up accepting abusive behavior that is done towards them. So I'll say that again, they end up accepting abusive behavior that is done towards them. The truth is that these self-sabotaging patterns occur in our subconscious. So we're subconsciously driven to walk into familiar territory. So it's only until we start to work on consciously trying to break these patterns that we finally begin to draw ourselves towards healthier environments. In my late 20s, I ended up working for a covert narcissist, and I worked there for 3 years. So covert narcissists are those subtle narcissists who play games with your mind in such a subtle way that it makes you question if it's even happening or if you're the one who's making it all up. I recall at the very first interview, he put his feet up onto a chair and started bragging about all of the places he'd been and all of the things he'd done. It's like he had very little interest in me and more interest in bragging about himself, and that giving that sense of grandiosity towards him, right? This deep arrogance, it's beyond ego. I, at the time, was very desperate for a job because I was desperate to leave my toxic home environment. So I took it, and I ended up staying there for 3 years because it was in the type of environment that I was used to. So usually the red flags are crystal clear, but we can choose to take action on it or ignore it. So in that particular circumstance, I saw a red flag at the initial interview, but I walked straight into it. And that's what most of us, unfortunately, tend to do when we're used to that sort of environment. We walk straight into it instead of listening to the red flags and taking action based on our intuition. So far many people Far too many people become victims of abuse because we choose to ignore those red flags that we saw in the first day or the first week or the first month. I personally was gaslighted daily as a consequence in my home, in my job, and in my relationships. So it became my normal. So what does gaslighting actually mean? So I've been talking about narcissistic traits because narcissists do tend to be expert gaslighters. And that's why it's really important to have awareness of what those narcissistic traits are. So what does gaslighting actually mean? It means having your emotions and your reality denied. I'll say that again. It means having your emotions and your reality denied. So like I said, narcissists are expert gaslighters because their intention is to manipulate you. However, it's also important to know that not only people with the narcissistic trait will gaslight. Some people may actually, in fact, be very well intentioned, but they just might not be aware of what they're doing. But the thing is that even if they're not aware of what they're doing, it still does not make that okay. What happens when you're being gaslighted is that you start to accept the reality of the other person to be your own. So you start to accept their reality as your own. So these are some examples here on the screen for you of some gaslighting examples that you might have heard before. Stop being so sensitive. Okay, especially if you're highly sensitive, unfortunately, you'll probably have heard that a lot. So stop being so sensitive. That never happened. You're overreacting. You need help. Why can't you take a joke? Why are you always so angry? You're exaggerating. There's no reason why you should feel that way. Can you not handle it? Come back when you're done wasting my time. You're being way too sensitive over this. All you have to do is follow my instructions. You have no idea what you're talking about. Others in the company have it worse than you. What they'll also do is they'll reroute conversations to something that you did wrong. So they'll secretly sabotage you. Now, this is one really important thing I want you all to know. Gaslighting is a power game that you don't know you're playing. Its purpose is to manipulate you by making you question yourself and lose confidence. You'll also find that gaslighters often accuse other people of doing what they're actually doing. And that's called projecting. So an example of that is that they might tell you, oh, you're being so manipulative. So they'll actually accuse you of what they're doing. That's what projecting means. They'll also make you believe that you're the one with the problem. And that'll make you believe that you're the one who's going crazy and that you're unbalanced and that you're overly sensitive and getting affected by it all far too much than you should, or that you're out of touch with reality and that there's something wrong with you. But that is not the reality. Their gaslighting behavior just leaves you feeling confused, isolated, and anxious. The other thing is when you're being gaslighted, a lot of the time you will not notice it because it's so subtle, or afterwards it'll leave you totally confused and questioning what actually happened. If you try and argue it with the person, it can become really frustrating because they will tend to deny it. So over time, because of that frustration that you might feel, you might end up silencing yourself. And in doing so, that's when you start to accept the reality of the other person, unfortunately. And that's where your self-worth starts to deteriorate. So what are some common fears here that people tend to have from what I've noticed, and also from my own past experience? fears of leaving the situation. So people might fear leaving the situation because they might feel that their needs might not be met elsewhere. So they might not quite acknowledge that their needs are really not even close to being met where they are, but they might fear that it might be worse elsewhere. Or you might fear that you'll lose your job. And especially during this pandemic, many employers have unfortunately exploited their staff and threatened them with their job. They are making their employees work longer hours. They're reducing their pay, even if the business is thriving. So that's exploitation. And it's a sad truth that some people are just profiting from the situation, and that's simply not okay. When you are gaslighted to believe their reality, which is an actual reality, then it will make you question yourself and what you might deserve. If your self-worth is low at that point, and you're sticking around in this situation, then it might make you question what you really deserve, unfortunately. So your self-worth becomes sacrificed when you remain in these environments. For codependents in particular, it's particularly difficult to leave these situations because codependents are overgiving people pleasers, and they especially struggle to set boundaries and are very out of touch with their own needs and their sense of self and who they even are in their identity. A gaslighter who's in a position of power will use that power over you, and it will make you feel unvalued, disrespected, and not heard. Their purpose is to undermine you, to lower your self-esteem and bully you. And because gaslighting is very slow and very confusing, like you might not realize it's even happening to you. So that's what makes you question even more if you're the one who's going crazy and making it all up. So what to do in these situations? First of all, know that it's not your fault. You know your reality and how you feel. Gaslighting is all about distorting your sense of reality. So if you know you're experiencing gaslighting, take the time to really sit with yourself. Sit with what you know to get yourself back and grounded into your reality. Trusting yourself is key here. Trusting your intuition and that discomfort, that feeling that you'll be getting, even if you can't intellectually explain it. Trusting that feeling is key to coping with this type of toxic behavior. I always say that our intellect, our logical mind sometimes needs longer to catch up with our intuition. Our intuition will signal things to us first. We don't need our intellectual mind to have evidence for us to take action on it. That intuition that's giving you that feeling in your body is evidence enough. So the first step to freeing yourself is to recognize that it's actually happening. So awareness is key. So if you recognize any of these phrases I've got on the screen right now, it's really important to accept the reality of the situation and then take a firm stand and leave if you need to. Assert yourself when you become aware of what's happening. Speak up for yourself and assert yourself. And if you're then being gaslighted in return for asserting yourself, then you'll know that this really isn't the right environment for you, and it really is not a healthy environment for anyone to be in. So if you're struggling to leave, work on understanding where this fear is coming from. Trauma bonding is the fear of leaving an abusive environment that you've become bonded to. I'll say that again, because trauma bonding is a term that's used to describe the fear of leaving an abusive environment that you've become bonded to. It's basically an addiction to trauma. And this can be really hard to break, which is what makes it really important to work with someone to help you break free from it. Now, what I'd like to offer all of you is a worksheet, which you will get after this session is complete. I believe you'll be receiving it via email, but I'd like you to reflect and journal on these questions here and meditate on them. So, number one, what red flags did you notice in the first day, week, or month at your job, or even the interview? What were those red flags that you might have seen that you ignored? And to be honest, this does apply in any situation, whether it's a workplace or a relationship or anything. When things become toxic, usually you do get a red flag quite early on. But unfortunately, too many of us ignore it. Number two, what do you notice from your upbringing or your past relationships that might have drawn you towards this familiar territory? So what is this sense of familiarity that you might be drawn to? Three is what gaslighting statements can you recall that someone will have told you in your workplace? So looking back at these examples, which ones sound familiar to you? Number four is ground yourself. Now, the grounding yourself is important to connect yourself back to your own reality, because once you start to believe someone else's reality, you're no longer in touch with yourself, your mind, or your body. So ground yourself. Close your eyes and meditate on it. Put your right hand on your heart, your left hand on your belly, and breathe in and out, and just reconnect to yourself, or practice meditation regularly if you're able to, even if it's just 5 minutes a day to begin with. And once you've done that, write down, once you feel more grounded and connected, write down in what way your reality is different from what you're being told. Question number five is write down ways in which you can assert yourself or communicate your needs and discomfort. So thinking ahead sometimes helps when you're prepared to assert yourself. And to be honest, it's never too late. While you're being gaslighted, it can be difficult to, in the moment, speak up for yourself, because it might confuse you so much that you don't really understand what's happening. So once you've come to that awareness and realization, think about ways in which you can assert yourself so that you can go into this situation and go in to the people at hand and communicate your needs and your discomfort, if that's the case. And like I said earlier, if you're being gaslighted in return, that means that it really is time to leave, that your needs will not be heard or cared for in the way that they should be. Number six is, if you do not feel heard, what is holding you back from leaving right now? List those fears down. Fears are usually what hold us back, unfortunately, from leaving toxic situations. 7 is, which one of those fears are you willing to confront today? And finally, I'd like you to get really specific with thinking about your vision for the future. Sometimes when we spiral into these toxic situations, it traps us, and time moves on, and we're not getting any closer towards our vision. So have that vision really clear in your mind and know what you're working towards, and know whether or not where you are right now is aligning with where you actually want to be, where you want to be heading. We all need to pave that road, pave that path towards where we're going to. So once you've gotten specific about your vision, write down your next micro step to help you get closer to that vision. And it can be a tiny little step. It can even be reading an article or start reading a book. anything that can make you start implementing something today towards achieving that vision. When it comes to fear, fear is a key thing that holds us back in all of this. When it comes to fear, I always say this: you can either choose to see it and run away from it, or you can choose to confront it head on and say, I see you, but I'm doing this anyway because I know my worth. And I'll leave you with this quote by Jack Canfield, who says, everything you want is on the other side of fear. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Doyle. I am by day a professor of voice in the School of Theater and Dance at East Carolina University, which is in the States in North Carolina, pretty close to the Atlantic coast. And I guess by night or in my free time, I am a vocal coach and researcher, and I'm very, very interested in helping women harness the power of their voices. So my work is called Change Your Voice, Change Your Life. Voice science, brain science, girl power. So I wanted to start today with the question, why don't women speak up? And to share a little story of my own of when I spoke up and why I chose to speak up and then think about it later. My first job out of college, I was a performance major, and my first job out of college was at a children's theater company in South Korea, which is very strange, but that's where it was. And at the time, I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know where Seoul was on a map before I took the job. But I took the job, and I was very excited to be there. And so I did what I had always done. I shut my mouth, and I listened to my boss, and I did my work, and I didn't ask questions. And ever since middle school, really, those things had done very well for me. It had been, follow the rules, don't ask questions, get gold stars, get good grades, and there we are. And I think for a lot of us in middle school in particular, those things start to happen. And I get it. If you've ever worked with middle school age children, which I have, I understand, because they can go crazy. If you've ever stood in an auditorium stage while they run around in circles like a pack of feral wolves, you would also reward, Susie Smith, who is sitting in the front row quietly waiting for instructions. So I understand. But the problem with this is that we teach girls not to speak up. And that works pretty well for us during school. And then we get into the workplace, and girls who were taught and rewarded for not speaking up become women who don't know how to. And the script flips when we get into the workplace. All of a sudden, leaders are women who speak up and ask questions and think outside the box and challenge the status quo. And all of these things that we had been rewarded for not doing become the things that we're supposed to be doing. And that creates a real problem for a lot of women. So I had been at my job about 6 months, and I had dinner with the artistic director, who was sort of my boss. And he had just mentioned to me what a great job I was doing, and that when his contract came up for renewal, he was considering not renewing, and that he thought I would be really wonderful in that role. And I was floored. I was 25 at the time, and I had never been in a big leadership position before, and I was so excited for this opportunity. So I thought, yes, this is going to happen. And over the next 6 months or so, I became more comfortable in the company. I became more comfortable in the country, and I started to speak up. I started to ask questions and offer suggestions and challenge things and speak my mind. And I was feeling really, really good. I was feeling really authentically me, and like I was contributing to the company. And the time came when he announced that he would not be re-signing his contract and that in-house interviews would begin. And my interview went a little something like this. They asked me, Jessica, why do you think you would be right for this role? And I listed 15 reasons of the changes I would make and how to get more butts in seats and how to have more community outreach, all of these wonderful things that I had been speaking up about. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Jessica, you've really changed. It used to be you were so easy. It was just ask Jessica and she's on it. And now, I don't know, you've become difficult. And I didn't get the job. And I was crushed because I was feeling so good about the work that I was doing and about authentically speaking my truth. I felt like I was acting like a leader. And then I was punished for doing all of those things. So why don't women speak up? We don't because there's risk involved. And often that risk is significant. Speaking up can threaten our relationship with our supervisors, as it did with mine. And it can result in negative performance evaluations and undesirable job assignments, to be labeled difficult, as I was to the word. It can even result in termination. And because of that, a lot of women choose not to speak up. Why women must speak up. The problem with that is that silence equals acceptance. And I'm going to quote Catherine Sanderson, whose book I'm going to use several times in this presentation, Why We Act, Turning Bystanders into Moral Rebels. And she says, silence conveys a lack of concern or even tacit acquiescence, making it far more likely that it will continue. Silence equals acceptance. But when we choose to speak up, we not only show our own courage, but we influence others to speak up also, especially other victims, especially other people who have been through what we have been through. And I think we see that in the Me Too movement that started and has quickly gathered steam. It started with one or two women in Hollywood and became this huge, really, I know in the States and globally, this really huge movement asking for change. So it is imperative that we as women speak up. So my presentation today, I'm going to divide in half. The first half is going to deal with our external voice, or the voice that comes out of your mouth, so speaking clearly and confidently. And then the second half is going to involve the internal voice, or the voice in your head, and dealing with what I like to call imposter syndrome or imposter syndrome, dealing with the fear of speaking up, things like that, conquering that fear. So to start with speaking clearly and confidently, it all comes down to three major things that I think we can quickly change that'll make pretty big positive impacts on the voice coming out of our mouth. So the first one is your posture and alignment. The second one is breathing. And the third one is resonance. And if you aren't familiar with that term, I will explain it here in a moment. So I'm going to start with posture and alignment. And I teach in a theater program. And one of the body work modalities we use a lot of is called body mapping. And in body mapping, we identify 6 points of balance in the body. Okay, and you can see them on the skeleton there. The first one is the atlanto-occipital joint, and that is just where your skull meets your spine. So if you take your pointer fingers and you put them in the little indentations behind your ears, if you imagine drawing a line between those fingers, that would be where that joint sits. And you'll know you're balanced if it feels like it's just, your head is just gliding on your spine, kind of like a bobblehead. Number 2 is your arm structure. Okay, so our collarbone should live horizontal, okay, to the floor. And then our arms come off of that collarbone. When I was growing up, we would sit in church and my mom would always tap me on the shoulder to like, put your shoulders back, put your shoulders back. And I would get so frustrated. And the truth is that we don't want them back militaristically. You want to think more, for the best alignment, about your shoulders being down as if they are wings that fall down your back. And that actually enables our rib cage to expand for breathing, all right? And really helps keep us in alignment. So you have the head on the neck, you have the arms on the torso or on the rib cage. The third place of balance is the lumbar and thoracic spine. Okay, so our spine, and again, we don't want to go towards this fully thrusted forward militaristic stance, nor do we want to be scrunched all the way back in that C shape. So For each place of alignment, which we'll get up and play with in just a few minutes, if you think of extremes, if 1 is my chin being all the way forward, like a turtle, and 10 is my chin being tucked all the way back, like a wrestler, most of us want to live at about a 4, a 5, or a 6. And I would say it's the same for the arms and the shoulders. It's the same for the spine, the hips and the pelvis, the knees, and then the ankles. Now, the thing to remember with posture and alignment is that if any one of these 6 places are out of alignment, the whole body is out of alignment, okay? So what affects our posture and alignment as women specifically? Heavy bags, high heels. This is a big one. If we go back and look at number 6 at the ankle to the foot, okay, so when your foot is flat on the floor and you have the weight evenly distributed, high heels changes all of that. All of a sudden, all of your weight is on the front of your foot, okay? And so that ankle can very, very easily get out of alignment. Carrying children, all right? And if you have children, then you've definitely experienced this, having that baby on one hip, popping that spine and that hip out of alignment, older, heavier children. Carrying groceries, carrying heavy things that are going to take you out of alignment. Being pregnant, and I'm 5 months pregnant, so I'm experiencing this right now, okay? If you've ever carried a child, you know that that weight shift to the center of gravity shifts, and so that can cause an alignment shift in your body. So why do we care? All right, why do we care? We care because our alignment affects our breathing, it affects our confidence, and not only how we feel about ourselves, but more so how others perceive us. And it also affects the sound of your voice. And that is one I think that we don't talk about as regularly, or maybe newer to you. I think everyone's heard about, standing tall to breathe, or you have the string coming out of the top of your head, the rib cage is expanding, we don't want to breathe with our shoulders up, things like that we look less confident when we're smushed. And if you haven't checked out the TED Talk on power poses, I highly recommend it, but about the idea of gaining confidence from standing in a certain way. But one that I concern myself with a lot is how posture and alignment actually affect the sound of the voice coming out of our mouth. So the first thing we're going to focus on is breathing. And my quote, which I stole from one of my professors in my graduate program, is that your breath should both relax the body and energize the voice. And he was giving me that note saying, yours does neither. So I had some work to do at that time on my breathing. Some of the common things that we fear with breathing and public speaking is heavy breathing while speaking. We're not able to catch our breath during our talk. Tension in the neck, shoulders, chest. Vocal fry or lack of energy in the voice. That one I call talking like a Kardashian when you're down here all of the time. Hey, girl. Okay. And that has been very popular in young women as of late. And that lack of energy in the voice, not only does it not sound good, but also what you're doing is you're actually rubbing your vocal folds together when you do that. And over time, it can cause real vocal problems. It can tire out your voice quicker, it can cause your folds to swell, and it can cause you to have an inherent raspiness or graveliness to your voice. So that's one you want to be careful with. Lack of breath can cause a lack of volume. And also, as I'm sure you all know, it can cause increased anxiety. When you have a lack of oxygen in the body can more quickly activate that sympathetic nervous system and go into fight or flight. The other thing I want to mention is the vagus nerve. So this is something that is of new excitement to me. So the vagus nerve is part of what is called our parasympathetic nervous system. So if you think of our body being like a car, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight. It's the gas pedal. We're ready to go. The anxiety is there. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the brake. It's the one that slows us down. And what I find very interesting is that that nerve is connected not only to the gut from the brain, but also to the larynx, to the voice. And so our ability to calm ourselves when we get worked up actually has a direct effect on the sound of our voice. So I find that to be very, very interesting. So we're going to do, if you'd like to join me, I'm going to lead you through some breath work. And we're going to talk about first just where the body can expand. So if you're able to stand, please stand. I'm going to sit so you can still see me, or just sit tall wherever you are. And what I'm going to ask you to do first is to just take a couple of deep, normal breaths and just notice where in your body you expand the most. Okay, so go ahead and do that. In through the mouth, out through the nose, in through the nose, out through the mouth, whatever feels good for you. And just notice where in your body you can expand. Good. So every body is different, and every body is going to expand differently. And there's been some research done that different body types, exomorphs and mesomorphs and so on and so forth, expand in different places. All that's truly important is that you know where it feels best for you to expand. So we have 3 places in our body when we breathe in that expansion can happen. The first one is obviously going to be the rib cage, the chest and rib cage. And when we breathe in, our ribs move up and out like the handle on a bucket, okay? Which is going to cause our chest to rise, right? And we're going to get an expansion, and it's possible to get that expansion front and back. So that's the first place that we can expand. The second place is in our abdomen, all right? So if we're not sucking it in, okay, and we allow our abdomen to move freely, which it should, the abdomen was meant to move when you breathe in, that abdomen can also move out and in, okay? And the third place are the muscles in your pelvic floor. So those muscles have a trampolining effect, and when we breathe in, they can actually push down towards the ground, and when we breathe out, they can release, okay? And if you aren't familiar with those muscles, just pretend that you have to go pee and squeeze like you are trying to stop that urge or stop that stream of urine. And those are the muscles. They're the same for men and women. They're in the middle of the body. So your 3 places of expansions are your rib cage, your abdomen, and then the muscles in your pelvic floor. And the more expansion we can feel, the more full that breath is going to be that we take in. So what prevents expansion? What prevents expansion? What prevents us from breathing deeply? Well, shapewear would be one of the things, right? This idea that we need to tighten and smooth everything is going to prevent us from breathing naturally. Sucking it in is another one. Sucking it in is going to prevent us. And at least myself, I heard it all the time from the time I was young till now of suck it in, stand up, put your shoulders back, okay? It's really preventing the body from expanding and from getting the oxygen that we need to energize our voice. And the third one is going to be sitting at a computer, how your posture changes. This has been a huge one, and I've presented on this quite a few times over the last year since we all, or many of us, moved online because of the pandemic. I've been teaching online since March of 2020, and sitting at a computer desk wreaks havoc on your posture. You're hunched over. Oftentimes the camera isn't at eye level, so you're looking down at it. And all of these things are preventing our body from finding that natural expansion. Okay, so again, that's the rib cage. It's the abdominal wall, front and back, and then also the muscles in your pelvic floor. So before we go on, take 30 more seconds and take 3 or 4 more breaths and just focus on those 3 places of expansion and see if you can feel them move. See if you can find some movement and find that really natural breath. One more. All right, so what I'm going to take you through now is something that I use with my university students, and I call it my Monday morning reset. And the Monday morning reset, can obviously be used on Monday. I use it after the weekend when we're all coming back together and we get our voices and everything back in alignment. I use it every morning. This video, a video of this reset is available on my website, which I have at the bottom of the slide, free. So if that is of interest to you, check it out. You can download it and then you can reset yourself. So the first thing is we're going to start by just standing up. So if you can stand up, then you can join me. I'm going to talk you through it, but you can join in this part. And you're just going to ragdoll over. So just go ahead and hang over at your hips like a ragdoll and take a couple of deep breaths and just feel the expansion. Sometimes my back cracks really wonderfully when I'm hanging over like that, hanging over from my hips. Think about when you breathe in, you're reaching forward, and then on the exhale, you're letting everything just drop down and be nice and heavy. I'm just going to make this a little smaller. There we go. Nice and heavy and dropped down. Good. And then as you hang there, all right, take as many inhales as you need to come back up to standing. Okay, so inhale, roll, exhale, stop. Inhale, roll, exhale, stop until you've come back up to standing. So go ahead and take a moment and do that. All right, and once you have come back to standing, then you can sort of work through those 6 points of balance. Roll your shoulders a little bit, you can swing your hips back and forth, and just find an alignment that feels really good to you. And we're going to self-massage. So we are going to start on our temples with just some nice, easy self-massage. A lot of the muscles in the face connect at the temples. Okay, so it's a wonderful place to massage, to release some tension, and take as long as you need at each of these places. So if you need more at one place or another, feel free. And then we're going to move from those temples on down right here to this little horseshoe shaped joint, your temporal mandibular joint, or TMJ, in front of your ears. If you grind your teeth, you've probably heard of TMJ or heard that perhaps you have tension in that joint. So you're just going to real gently massage there and let that lower jaw hang right there. And then finally, you're going to take your fingers up under your cheekbones, and you're just going to open and close your mouth. And this is going to massage the big muscles in your cheeks called your masseter muscles, which you use for chewing. Sometimes that can hurt a little bit, be a little sensitive, so just be gentle, do what you need. We often carry a lot of tension here in the temples, at that TMJ, and then in those chewing muscles. Good. The next place we're going to do is take your thumb and very gently go under the chin, and you're just going to massage that very soft skin under your chin. This is the floor of your mouth or the root of your tongue. And it's also where our swallowing muscles are. And obviously, swallowing is involuntary, but sometimes those muscles like to activate while we're talking when they shouldn't be activated. And that results in something called constriction. So when we speak, our larynx, our voice box, has to move. It tilts forward and back, and it moves up and down. So think of a boa constrictor around something that wants to move. It's not so easy. And when we have that excess tension, okay, it can wreak havoc on our voice. It can cause it to tire out more quickly. It can change the sound of our voice. So it's great to just do a little massage on the root of that tongue and just get that nice and soft. It should feel like raw bread dough. Good. And then if it feels good to you, and if it does not, just pass this by, but if it feels good to you, you can take your hands on either side of your larynx and just very softly push it back and forth. Now, some people that makes them nauseated or doesn't feel good, that's fine. But it's a really wonderful way for getting any phlegm out of your throat that may have accumulated. Good. And then finally, what we're going to do is just take the head to one side. You're going to take your pointer finger and thumb, and you're just going to work this big ropey muscle in your neck. And this is your SCM, or your sternocleidomastoid, and it runs from the back of the head all the way down the collarbone. And it works when we turn the head. So if your neck is stiff from sleeping, it's often this muscle that gets sore. And I'm working mine like turning a key. And you can just kind of work from the top, which is up behind your ear, all the way down. And this is what's called an extrinsic muscle of the voice, meaning it's not directly related, but it is one that when it gets tense, it can cause a lot of uncomfortability to us. And then you can take it to the other side and do the same thing. And again, it's just this turning of a key motion to work that muscle out. Good. Now, if we were all together, I could have us do a massage circle and do a little shoulder massage on each other. So that's a great way to end the morning reset as well. But I use this all the time. I use it to just sort of focus myself, get my body in alignment, get ready for my day teaching, and whatever you have going on that day, particularly if it's presentation or a meeting, something like that. This is a really great way to get your body and your voice ready. So again, it's on my website, but it's just a roll up, and then we do some self-massage, and then a little massage on that muscle in the neck. All right, great. Okay, so this is not an anatomy lesson, but meet your voice. She's dying to meet you. So your vocal folds are located right behind your Adam's apple, this little notch in the cartilage in your neck. Okay, and if you put your fingers there and you talk, you can feel them vibrate. And if you haven't seen the vocal folds before, they look an awful lot like a vagina. So two incredibly strong parts of the female anatomy in one. So lucky you. These are your vocal folds. They're right here. They're the white pearlescent, and these are beautiful vocal folds because they're clear and white, and they have a lovely little shimmer of mucus on the top. If you're interested to know, if we're looking, we're looking from the back, the two protrusions are towards the posterior or back towards the back of your neck. And then the top of my picture is towards the front of your neck. So if I was looking down your throat, that's how I'm seeing these. So the vocal folds are made of muscle. They have some jello-like substance in them, some skin-like cells, and then some mucus kind of smeared on the top. And the muscle of the vocal folds is skeletal muscle. So it's the same kind of muscle that you work in the gym. They're very small, but they train in exactly the same way that your bicep and your tricep do, okay? It also means that they need to be warmed up. It also means that they can swell, that they can suffer abuse from misuse or overuse, okay? So these vocal folds, it means they can bruise like other areas of your body do. And when those things happen, either because you're sick or you have been misusing or overusing your voice, or your voice is tired or whatever, excuse me, it can result in sounding hoarse, sounding gravelly, a loss of range in your voice. Usually it's the higher pitches that go first when those vocal folds get tired or get swollen. So I am not a doctor, but if you find that your voice has been feeling different or sounding different, it's a good idea to check in with an ear, nose, and throat specialist and get that checked out. We think a lot about actors and singers using their voices, broadcast personalities, but the reality is a lot of us are what are called occupational voice users, teachers, clergy, doctors, lawyers, air traffic controller, those of us in customer service, sales. If you're using your voice as a large part of your career, all right, there is about a 40% chance that sometime throughout your life, you're going to have some sort of vocal ailment. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so talking about, we talked about posture and alignment. We talked about breathing, and now we're going to talk about resonance. So go ahead and take your fingers and just put them on that little notch in your throat. You can say, hi, my name is Jessica and I'm freaking phenomenal, or insert name here, obviously. And what you should feel is some vibration going on there. So if we think of your voice or your vocal tract like a tube, from those vocal folds out your mouth, like a tube, okay? The sound waves travel up that tube, and if our voice is sounding really great and bright and shimmery and healthy and resonant, that tube is going to get excited and it's going to vibrate. So basically, if your voice is a car, the breath is the gas. And resonance equals that car working like a Prius. You're getting a lot of bang for your breath. You're getting a lot of mileage out of every breath or out of every tank of gas. If your voice is not resonant, it basically works like an old jalopy, okay, where it's gas guzzling. And that's where you're going to find that you're running out of air, or your voice sounds tired, or it's sitting way down here. Some of those vocal problems that we talked about at the beginning. So one way to maintain a resonant voice is focusing on the breath, but another is to just warm it up. And as I mentioned, the muscles of the vocal tract are skeletal muscle. So they warm up. It would be the same as going to the gym and doing a light jog or a stretch before you work out. It'd be the same idea. So I'm going to take us through a very brief vocal warm up today. My number one tool for warming up the voice is a straw. Okay, so you don't need to have one today, but I highly recommend getting a straw, okay? 2 to 3 minutes of what I'm going to show you at the beginning of your day or half an hour before your meeting or your presentation will ensure that your voice is going to be warmed up and going to feel really good, okay? So if we think of speaking or singing like sitting on a swing and having to pump with our legs to get going, using a straw is like someone giving you a push. Okay, so it's wonderful in the morning if you have that croaky sort of whiskey troll morning voice, all right? If you're feeling hoarse, if you're feeling under the weather, straw hums are really awesome. So if you have a straw handy, happen to have one in your glass of water, you can grab it. If not, humming is perfectly acceptable as well. So what you would do is we're just going to hum, and we're going to start with just what I call hills, which are just small. They're just small little shifts in pitch. You don't have to be a singer. We're just using our speaking voice, and we're just going to. And if I was humming, it would be. So if you're somewhere where you can, go ahead and give that a try. And then you can advance from hills into sirens, which are just exactly what they sound like. You go from the very bottom of your voice to the very top. There's no right or wrong, but it would sound something like this. Or if I did it with the straw, join in if you would like to. You can do them in the shower. You can do them in your car on the way to work. You could do them in your office at work if you have a good sound insulated office. But just 2 to 3 minutes of just humming through the straw, humming just without the straw, little hills, alternating with those sirens is going to ensure that the muscles in your voice are really warmed up and that you're going to be speaking really clearly. Okay, so we talked about posture and alignment, the importance of breathing, of expansion in the rib cage and the abdomen and the pelvic floor, how those things go together. And then the third piece of the puzzle would just be warming up that voice, okay, getting those muscles warm and working, all right? Because if your voice is a car, your breath is the gas. We want everything to work together. Fabulous. So I'm going to pause for just a moment and just, does anyone have any questions about that? And then I'm going to move on to sort of the second, let me stop for just a moment here. The second part of my presentation is on on more of the internal voice. But if there are any questions on the external voice to pop in the chat, I'm happy to answer them, or you can always reach out after the presentation. No, we're all doing okay? Okay, all right, fabulous. And I'm going to finish up with talking about the internal voice, talking about dealing with speaking up against toxic people and dealing with the fear of doing that. So I have what I call my 3 commandments of conquering fear. Okay. The first one is prepare, because winging it is for the birds. Prepare means practice. Number 2 is pinpoint, keep your focus. Okay. So we prepare and then we focus on not what could happen, or excuse me, not what will happen, but what might happen. Okay. And then the third one is power. Power is courage. So we practice, we focus, and then we have to dive in. We have to speak up, and we have to do so courageously. So prepare. And I'm going to again pull back to Catherine Sanderson's book. She talks about actively playing out different types of responses to offensive remarks or problematic behavior. And in this case, we're talking about gaslighting. So why is preparation necessary? Well, preparation is necessary because the way that our brain makes change, the way that our brain learns new things is really fourfold. 1, it loves to connect to things that we already know. So when you're introduced new information, when you're actively playing out these different responses, each time that you practice, it's going to connect to the times that you've practiced before. Okay. Number 2 is that our brain loves positive emotional connection. This is good for me. And that's such a huge thing with conquering the fear of public speaking or of speaking up, is that we love the negative, right? We all love to ruminate. We love to focus on the negative. And what happens is your brain doesn't know the difference between doing something and just thinking that you're doing something. And so if the thoughts that you're having are negative, I hate speaking up, I always lose my train of thought, my mouth gets dry, my legs start to shake, what am I going to say? I've never prepared for this. I don't know how I'm going to go in and talk to that person. Okay. What you're doing is you're just activating that fight or flight response without actually even being in the situation. Okay. So we want to flip the script on that. We want to have positive emotional connection. I can do this. I love speaking up. This is so important. Learning this is good for me. Okay. It helps us conquer fear of the unknown. And that's a big fear. Not knowing how someone is going to respond, not knowing if you're going to be able to stay on track, or if you're going to get flustered or emotional or start to cry or be able to keep your cool. We really want is the more things that we can know and the more of the unknown we can eliminate, the more confident we are going to be. Okay. And the fourth one is that repetition is the key to lasting change. And this one is so important because it's one that's overlooked a lot when we do trainings. So there is a difference between initial learning and long-term learning. Okay, initial learning is something that you use in the moment, but it doesn't stick with you forever. It doesn't become part of your knowledge base. If you think back to when you were in school, okay, algebra is something that I had to know in the moment, but it is not part of my knowledge base now, right? So the key to creating lasting change, the key to it becoming part of your muscle memory, the key to something becoming part of your knowledge base is repetition, okay? So you can actively play out these different types of responses. So we've already talked about, oh, I'm not there yet. And the reason we also want to do this is that your time is precious, right? We want to be effective and efficient. I know for myself, I have young daughters, my husband, I work full time, right? I also present. So if I'm going to put something else on my plate, I better be able to do it quickly, all right? And I better be able to do it effectively. So what we can do is optimize our brain for practice. We can optimize our brain for preparation. And this might sound silly, but the first one is just eating, hydrating, and sleeping. And though those may seem just like basic tenets of human care, they're the first things that go out the window, right? If you have kids, if you have a job, if you get busy, what happens? I forgot to eat lunch today. Or, oh my gosh, I get to the end of the workday and I realize all I've had is a cup of coffee. Or I have a presentation tomorrow, so sleep goes out the window because I have to stay up late to get it done. And those are the things that our brain and our body and our voice need so that we can perform effectively and efficiently, so that we can be at our best. And they're the first things that go out the window. So we really need to prioritize them. Your brain runs on glucose, okay? The food that we eat, eating a balanced diet. Hydration also is key for the brain. It's also key for the voice because your voice doesn't have its own lubrication or hydration system. Okay, it's made of all this jello-like material. That's what lets our voice sound clear and brilliant. Think of jello getting dehydrated. It's not going to sound so great. And it takes 4 hours from the water you drink to hydrate the vocal folds. Okay, so if you have a morning meeting, something you might want to consider is immediately upon waking, having a glass of water, which is great for your brain, it's great for your body systems, and it's also really important so that your voice is hydrated. And the most important one is sleep. There are so many reasons why sleep is so important, okay? But just keep in mind that not getting enough sleep is, you are sabotaging your own work. And I know that's hard. It's hard as women. It's hard as parents. Sleep is often one of the things that go out the window. But whether it's overnight sleep or it's catching a 20-minute nap during your lunch break, sleep is so important for our brain health. The second one is exercise. So we all know that exercise is good for our mental health, it's good for our physical health, but it's really, really good for our brains. So BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is the chemical that is produced when learning occurs, okay? When we learn something new, BDNF is there. And exercise creates BDNF, aerobic exercise. So exercise is really miracle grow for the brain, all right? Our brains evolved to learn on the move. We evolved from being hunters and gatherers, right? We didn't always sit at desks and stare at computer screens all day. So a wonderful way when you're actively playing out these responses, when you're practicing for a meeting, when you're practicing for a speech or an interview, do it while walking. Walk very slowly on the treadmill. Walk around your bedroom. Walk around your backyard. Your brain evolved to learn on the move. You're going to be able to you're going to be able to learn what you need. You're going to be able to memorize those words and prepare those situations more effectively and more efficiently if you're doing it while moving. And the last one is to take a multisensory approach. So often people think I'm a visual learner, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a kinesthetic learner. We are all of those things. And the more senses that we can use, the more effectively and efficiently we can learn new material. So as we've already talked about, identifying gaslighting, and these might be some of the scenarios that you actively prepare for. You know, I don't know what you're talking about. You have a bad memory. That's just another crazy idea you got from your friends. These might be some of the things that you're preparing to speak up against. And Catherine Sanderson gives us some examples of things to say, things that you might prepare. Finding a short and clear way of expressing concern or disapproval. Hey, that's not cool. So for example, if we go back to, that's just another crazy idea you got from your friends. That's not cool. Hey, that's not cool would be a way of responding to that. So you're not getting on your soapbox. You're not speaking for 15 minutes at someone, right? Because we know the moment that we start to get aggressive in the way that we're speaking, we don't hear what they're saying anymore, right? And if you've ever had an argument with a spouse or a partner about that, you know that the minute that volume raises and the minute that tone gets aggressive, I don't care what you're saying. It's like reasoning with a goldfish, all right? It doesn't matter what you're saying. I'm responding to the tone of your voice. So another one might be assume the comment is sarcastic and identify it as such. You know, I know you're just trying to be funny, but some people really do think that women are too emotional to be president, right? And that cuts that off, right? So she says, assume the comment is sarcastic and identify it as such. And the third one that Sanderson uses is make the discomfort about you, not them. Well, I was raised in the church, so that comment is hard for me to hear. Or a close friend of mine was sexually assaulted in high school, so jokes about rape make me uncomfortable. Okay, that these might be ways that when you do confront someone who is gaslighting you, when you do confront that toxic person, these are things that you might say, and these are situations that you might prepare for. My second P is pinpoint or maintain your focus. So not what might happen, not what will happen, what might happen. You might be late for that meeting. Your legs might shake, your mouth might go dry, your palms might be clammy, someone's cell phone might go off. If you're on a virtual meeting, your 4-year-old might escape virtual preschool, right, and run into that meeting. It happened to me several times. All right. So you prepare for these things. And a story I'll just briefly share with you is about there was a very famous violinist who would prepare for auditions. And he wanted to prepare for not what will happen, but what might happen? He might be late. And so he would walk around his office building for 5 minutes like he couldn't find the door, and then sit down and play his piece. Your legs might shake. Okay, great. Do a wall sit for 30 seconds. Get those muscles activated. And then practice your conversation. Practice in front of your spouse, your partner, your girlfriends, your dog. Have someone's cell phone go off. Have someone start coughing. Have someone get up and leave the room, so that you're taking away the fear of the unknown. Okay, you're taking away that you're no longer afraid of what might happen because you've prepared for it, and you can maintain your focus and you can stay on track. And the final one is power. And the picture I have there are the penguins. A penguin does not dip his flipper into the water, he just jumps. So you prepare, you pinpoint, and then it's time to jump. It's time to just do it. It's time to walk up to that person. It's time to go into that office. It's time to have that conversation. So using the things that we've talked about, I highly recommend creating a ritual. And I would equate that to a basketball player shooting a free throw. Dribble, 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 spin, shoot. Same thing for you. Shoulders down. Nice deep breath. Let it out. Hum a little. Whatever it might be. But create a ritual that's going to put your body and put your voice in the place that you want it to be. It could be a mantra. It could be a breath sequence. It could be a stretch sequence. Whatever it is, but something that's going to tell yourself, I'm here and it's time to do this. I highly recommend recording yourself, which I know is sometimes uncomfortable. But the reality is that the sound of our voice to our own ears when we're talking is not the same sound that our audience gets. And you know that if you've ever listened to a recording of yourself and thought, this is not what I sound like, right? So make sure that you record yourself and you listen and watch back. The other thing is we often feel like we're emoting in a certain way, or we're giving off a certain energy, or we're not giving off a certain energy. And that's not what's coming across to our audience, okay? So I have that with students a lot, where I'll tell them, do you know you came in here and you were very defensive? Like, no, I wasn't. Well, it came across that way to me. And that's what matters, right? What matters is how you come across to your audience, how you sound, and how your body is looking, okay? And as I said before, just rehearse. Practicing is so essential. If you read Talk Like Ted, which is a wonderful book about public speaking, all of the best public speakers rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. No one goes in there and wings it, because we want to take away that fear of the unknown. And one last thing, just remember that how you talk to yourself really matters. And as I mentioned before, your brain doesn't know the difference between doing and just thinking you're doing, okay? So an exercise that I love, and this is on my website as well, is to just write down a brief sentence about your fear. I hate public speaking. I always get off track and can't get back on. And then flip the script. I love public speaking. I love speaking my mind. I love speaking my authentic truth. I always stay on track and get my point across clearly and confidently. And then write that down and stick it in 3 or 4 places where you're going to see it. One should be your bedside table, so it's the first thing you read in the morning and the last thing you read before you go to bed at night, so your brain can file that away for long-term learning. On the visor of your car, on your bathroom mirror, so that it's something that you are repeating to yourself and it's going to become part of your knowledge base. And that is the end of my presentation. So thank you all very much. I will stop presenting. There we go.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was really informative. Now I'm like, oh my God, my voice. I sound like a Kardashian. I probably do on it. I don't know. So before we log off, I just like to mention, if you are interested in working with either Michelle or Jessica, their websites will be linked in the email that you'll receive after the event, along with some takeaways that they have provided. And then also, we are working on offering more workshops and events like this, so please reach out to us if you're interested in a training or workshop. Contact info will be in the email as well. And then lastly, you can find us on social media. Please give us a follow if you're interested in what we do. And then also take a moment to please add your experience to our survey. The link will also be in that email. You'll have a lot of information in that email, so make sure you look out for it. The more responses we have, the easier it will be for us to make real change in the workplace. So with that, that's all for tonight. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope you received useful information that you can use to make changes in your life or your organization. So that's all. Thank you guys so much.